The rain was falling harder now, turning the jungle floor into slick mud beneath my knees. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't think. All I could do was watch as Winnie pressed her small, trembling body deeper under the edge of the...
It's pinned! We have to move the tire now!
On three, 1, 2, 3! It's moving! Keep pulling!
Easy now, easy, you're okay.
Watch the claws!
Almost there!
Massive tire, using every ounce of strength in her arthritic legs to hold up weight that should have crushed her instantly. The tiger cub beneath that tire was dying. Its eyes were half closed, amber irises dulling with each shallow breath. Blood matted the orange and black stripes along its shoulder where the steel rim had pinned it to the earth. The cub was maybe 3 months old, small, helpless, and completely at the mercy of a transport tire that had rolled off an old logging truck and trapped it like a vice. And my dog, my rescue dog who still needed her orthopedic bed to sleep without pain, who took joint supplements every morning with her breakfast, who'd been hours away from euthanasia at a kill shelter 6 months ago, was wedged underneath that tire, holding it up with her own body so the cub could breathe. Her legs were shaking so violently I could see the tremors from where I knelt. The 2 rangers beside me worked frantically to wedge a steel bar under the tire's opposite edge, their hands slipping in the mud, their voices tight with urgency. We had seconds. Maybe less. If Winnie's strength gave out before we got that bar in place, the tire would drop, and both animals would be crushed. Almost there, one ranger muttered, jamming the bar deeper into the gap Winnie had created. But then the jungle went silent. Not the normal quiet of rain on leaves. This was different. Heavier. The kind of silence that makes your spine go rigid and your instincts scream danger. Even the birds stopped calling. The ranger's hands froze mid-motion. His eyes went wide. "Don't move," he whispered. I felt it before I saw it, a presence so powerful it seemed to change the air pressure around us. The hairs on the back of my neck stood up. My heart hammered against my ribs. Slowly, moving only my eyes, I looked toward the tree line. And there she was. A fully grown Bengal tigress, stepping out from between the vines like a ghost materializing from shadow. She was massive, easily 300 pounds of pure muscle and predatory grace. Her head was lowered, ears pinned back, golden eyes locked on us with an intensity that made my stomach drop. Every line of her body radiated controlled violence, the kind of stillness that comes right before an explosion. She'd come for her baby. And we were kneeling right next to it. The tigress took another step forward, her enormous paws silent on the wet earth. Her lips pulled back slightly, revealing teeth that could snap a neck in one bite. She was close enough now that I could see the rain dripping from her whiskers, could hear the low rumble building in her chest, not quite a growl yet, but a warning that made my blood run cold. I was frozen. The rangers were frozen. We all understood the math: one wrong move, one sudden sound, and she would charge. There was nowhere to run. No time to grab a weapon. No chance of survival if she decided we were a threat. But Winnie didn't freeze. My little shelter dog, the one who flinched at loud noises, who needed calming treats during thunderstorms, who still had nightmares from whatever hell she'd survived before I found her, stayed exactly where she was. Wedged under that tire. Holding up impossible weight. Refusing to abandon the cub even with its mother standing 15 feet away, ready to kill. The tigress's eyes shifted from me to Winnie. And for one breathless moment, the 2 animals looked at each other, predator and prey, wild and domestic, powerful and broken. I waited for the attack. Waited for the lunge that would end everything. But it didn't come. Instead, something happened that I still can't fully explain. The tigress's ears flickered forward, just slightly. Her head tilted a fraction of an inch. And in her eyes, those ancient, golden, merciless eyes, I saw something I never expected to see in a wild animal staring at the creature holding her cub. Recognition. She understood. Somehow, impossibly, she understood that Winnie wasn't a threat. That this small, shaking, abandoned dog was trying to save her baby. The ranger beside me seized the moment. With one final shove, he wedged the steel bar fully beneath the tire. Now, he hissed. Together, we heaved upward. The tire shifted. Lifted. The tiger cub let out a weak, gasping cry and rolled free from the crushing weight, collapsing into the mud. Winnie stumbled backward, her legs finally giving out, and I caught her before she hit the ground. She was trembling uncontrollably, her whole body racked with pain and exhaustion. The tigress moved faster than my eyes could track. One moment she was 15 feet away. The next, she was standing over her cub, her massive body creating a shield between us and her baby. She lowered her head and touched her nose to the cub's face, and the small tiger let out a soft chuff, weak, but alive. The mother tigress looked at us one more time. Then she carefully, gently, picked up her cub by the scruff of its neck and turned toward the jungle. Before she disappeared into the trees, she paused. Just for a heartbeat. Her eyes found Winnie one last time, still trembling in my arms, and something passed between them that I'll never be able to put into words. Then she was gone. I held Winnie against my chest as the rain poured down around us, feeling her rapid heartbeat against mine, her shallow breathing starting to steady. The rangers collapsed back on their heels, faces pale, hands shaking. "What just happened?" one of them whispered. I didn't have an answer. All I knew was that my broken shelter dog, the one the world had given up on, the one who needed a special bed and medications just to make it through the day, had just done something that would haunt me forever. She'd risked everything to save a stranger. And somehow, against all odds, a wild mother had chosen trust over violence. But this wasn't the end of the story. It was only the beginning. Because 3 months later, when danger came for us in that same jungle, we would discover just how deep that moment of trust had gone. And we would learn that some debts, the ones paid in courage and compassion, are never forgotten by the wild. To understand what happened next, you need to know where Winnie came from. You need to know about the dog no one wanted, and why a woman like me understood exactly what it meant to be discarded. Let me take you back to the day I first saw her, shivering in the corner of a shelter kennel, with a euthanasia date already marked on her cage. Before we continue with Winnie's incredible journey, do me a small favor, hit that subscribe button right now. Because if you love stories about forgotten animals who become heroes, about wild bonds that defy nature, and about love that changes everything, you're in exactly the right place. We share these true stories every week, and trust me, you don't want to miss what happens next. Subscribe now, and let's continue. The first time I saw Winnie, she was pressed into the farthest corner of Kennel 23, making herself as small as possible. It was a Tuesday afternoon in March, and the shelter was overcrowded as always. The noise was overwhelming, dogs barking, metal gates clanging, volunteers calling to each other over the chaos. But Winnie wasn't making a sound. She just sat there, trembling, her brown eyes fixed on the floor as if she could disappear by sheer force of will. The kennel card hanging on her gate told a story I'd read too many times before. Name, Winnie. Age, approximate, 7 years. Breed, mixed. Medical, severe arthritis, hip dysplasia, malnutrition. Behavioral, fearful, requires a patient home. Adoption status, last chance, euthanasia scheduled March 17th. 3 days. She had 3 days left. I knelt down slowly, keeping my distance from the bars. "Hey, sweet girl," I said softly. "It's okay. Nobody's going to hurt you." Winnie didn't move. Didn't even lift her head. But I saw her ears twitch slightly, registering my voice. Her body was painfully thin, ribs visible through patchy fur, her back legs held at an awkward angle that spoke of chronic pain. There were scars on her muzzle and along her side, the kind that come from years of neglect and rough living. The shelter volunteer who'd been showing me around sighed behind me. "That one's been here 4 months," she said quietly. The owner surrendered. They said she was too expensive to treat, the arthritis medications, the special diet, the vet visits. Nobody wants to adopt a senior dog with medical issues. She's run out of time. I stared at Winnie's trembling form and felt something crack open in my chest. I knew what it was like to be considered too broken to fix. My husband Daniel had died 2 years earlier, suddenly, senselessly, in a car accident that left me standing in our empty house wondering what the point of any of it was. The grief was supposed to get easier, everyone said. Time heals all wounds, they promised. But some wounds don't heal. They just become part of who you are. I'd started volunteering at the wildlife sanctuary 6 months after Daniel's funeral, desperate for something to fill the silence. I told myself it was about conservation, about helping injured animals recover and return to the wild. But the truth was simpler and sadder. I needed to be around creatures who understood what it meant to be hurt. The sanctuary was where broken things went to remember they were still alive. And looking at Winnie, hunched in that corner like she was apologizing for taking up space, I saw myself. "I'll take her," I heard myself say. The volunteer blinked. "Are you sure? The medical costs alone." "I'm sure." 2 hours later, I was carrying Winnie out to my truck, her frail body wrapped in a donated blanket. She was so light it made my heart ache. At the vet's office, Dr. Morrison gave me the full picture: severe arthritis in both hips and her front right shoulder, chronic pain that would require daily medication, possible nerve damage from an old injury that had never been treated properly. "She'll need glucosamine supplements, anti-inflammatory medication, possibly pain management therapy," Dr. Morrison said, writing prescriptions. "And she absolutely needs an orthopedic bed, something that supports her joints. Regular beds will make the pain worse." I didn't hesitate. I bought the best orthopedic dog bed I could find, memory foam, heated, with bolstered edges so she could rest her head comfortably. I bought the medications, the supplements, the special food formulated for senior dogs with joint issues. I bought soft toys she could chew without hurting her teeth, and calming treats for the anxiety that made her shake during thunderstorms. The checkout total made me wince, but I handed over my card anyway. Because Winnie deserved to know that someone thought she was worth it. The first week was hard. She wouldn't eat unless I sat beside her. She flinched every time I moved too quickly. She slept on her new orthopedic bed by the porch, but always with one eye half open, as if waiting for the moment I'd change my mind and send her back. But slowly, so slowly I almost didn't notice, she started to heal. Not her body. The arthritis wasn't going away. The pain would always be there, managed but never gone. But something else healed. The way she held herself. The way she started meeting my eyes. The way she began to trust that when I left the house, I'd come back. 3 months after I adopted her, Winnie wagged her tail for the first time. I cried. I started bringing her to the sanctuary with me. The other volunteers fell in love with her immediately, this gentle, quiet dog who moved carefully through the world, who seemed to understand that everyone and everything deserved kindness. She'd sit beside me while I prepared food for the injured birds, or lie on her heated bed near the enclosures, just keeping the animals company. The wildlife seemed to sense something in her too. Even the most skittish creatures would calm when Winnie was nearby. She has an old soul, one of the rangers told me once, watching Winnie rest her head on her paws, eyes half closed in contentment. Like she's seen hard things and decided to be gentle anyway. That was exactly it. Winnie had every reason to be angry at the world. To be bitter and broken and mean. But instead, she chose softness. Chose trust. Chose to believe that not all hands would hurt her. I thought that was the most extraordinary thing about her. I had no idea what she was truly capable of. Not until that rainy afternoon when she froze at the edge of the jungle, staring into the trees with an intensity I'd never seen before. Not until she ran toward danger instead of away from it. Not until she wedged her broken, arthritic body beneath a tire to save a creature that should have been her natural enemy. That day changed everything. But it started here, in a shelter kennel, with a dog the world had given up on, and a woman who understood exactly how that felt. The morning started wrong. I felt at the moment I opened my eyes, a heaviness in the air, like the atmosphere itself was holding its breath. Winnie felt it too. Instead of her usual slow, careful stretch on her orthopedic bed, she was already awake, standing rigid by the porch door, staring toward the tree line. "What is it, girl?" I asked, pulling on my boots. She didn't respond. Didn't even glance at me. Her ears were forward, her body tense in a way I'd never seen before. When I opened the door, she didn't wait for permission, she stepped outside and stood perfectly still, nose lifted to catch a scent I couldn't smell. The sanctuary was too quiet. Usually, mornings were a symphony of sound, macaws calling from the canopy, monkeys chattering in the distance, the rustle of small animals moving through the underbrush. But today, there was nothing. Just an eerie, pressing silence that made my skin prickle. At the sanctuary office, the other rangers noticed it too. "The birds aren't feeding," Maria said, frowning at the empty observation platforms. "They've been spooked since dawn. Something's got them on edge." "Could be a storm coming," suggested Thomas, but his voice lacked conviction. The sky was overcast but stable. No thunder. No wind. Just that strange, oppressive stillness. Winnie stayed close to my side as we made our rounds, but her behavior was completely different from her usual gentle companionship. She kept stopping, tilting her head like she was listening to something beyond human hearing. Her arthritis should have made her slow and careful, but she moved with purpose today, almost urgency, pausing at the edge of every path like she was trying to decide which direction to take. "She's acting weird," Maria observed, watching Winnie stare intently down the old logging road. "Is she okay? Does she need her pain medication?" "I gave her the full dose this morning," I said, confused. "She's not in pain. She's searching for something." By midday, the wrongness had intensified. 2 of our rehabilitated deer refused to leave their enclosure, huddling together in the corner despite the open gate. A family of wild boars that usually foraged near the visitor center had vanished completely. Even the insects seemed muted, the usual buzz of the jungle reduced to an anxious hum. "Something's happened," Thomas said finally. "Or something's about to happen. The animals know." That's when Winnie made her choice. She turned sharply toward the abandoned logging road, the one we rarely used anymore, overgrown and treacherous after years of neglect. Before I could call her back, she was moving, not running but walking with absolute determination, her arthritic legs carrying her forward like she'd been summoned. "Winnie, wait." I grabbed my radio and a medical kit out of habit and followed her, Maria and Thomas close behind. The logging road was worse than I remembered, thick mud from recent rains, fallen branches scattered like bones, and those massive old transport tires that had been dumped there decades ago, slowly being reclaimed by the jungle. Winnie moved through it all like she knew exactly where she was going. Then she stopped. Her whole body went rigid again, but this time, a low whine escaped her throat, not fear, but distress. She was staring at something ahead, partially hidden by overgrown ferns and hanging vines. I pushed through the vegetation and felt my breath catch. One of the transport tires, massive, steel-rimmed, easily 6 feet in diameter, had rolled down the embankment and was lying at an angle in the mud. But it wasn't empty. Beneath its crushing weight, barely visible, was a small, striped form. "Oh God," Maria whispered behind me. A tiger cub. It couldn't have been more than 3 months old, its orange and black fur matted with mud and blood. The tire had pinned it across the shoulder, and from the shallow, gasping breaths and the glazed look in its amber eyes, I knew it was dying. The weight was too much. The position was wrong. Even if we lifted the tire now, the damage might already be fatal. "We need to get that tire off now," Thomas said, already moving forward. "Maria, call for backup. We need." But he stopped mid-sentence. Winnie was moving again. Not toward me. Not toward safety. Toward the tire. Toward the dying tiger cub trapped beneath it. "Winnie, no." I lunged for her collar, but she was faster than I expected, faster than her arthritis should have allowed. She slipped past my reaching hands and did something that defied every instinct, every law of nature, every rational thought. She wedged herself under the edge of that massive tire. And she began to push. Her legs shook violently. Her breath came in sharp, pained gasps. But she pressed her shoulder against the tire's underside, using her own small body as a lever, creating just enough space for the cub to draw one more desperate breath. "She's trying to lift it," Maria breathed, stunned. "She's actually trying to lift it." Thomas and I dropped to our knees in the mud, grabbing the steel pry bar from the emergency kit. If Winnie could hold that position for just a few more seconds, if her broken, arthritic body could bear that impossible weight just a little longer, we might be able to wedge the bar underneath and save them both. "Hold on, girl," I whispered, tears already streaming down my face. "Just hold on." That's when the jungle went silent again. But this time, it wasn't the silence of anticipation. It was the silence of something arriving. Time fractured into impossible seconds. Winnie's legs were buckling. I could see the tremors running through her small body, could hear the soft whimpers she couldn't suppress as the weight of the tire bore down on her arthritic joints. Every instinct I had screamed at me to pull her out, to drag her away from this suicidal act of compassion before her bones shattered under the pressure. But if I pulled her out, the tire would drop. And the tiger cub would die. "Agnes, we need to move now," Thomas hissed, positioning the steel bar at the tire's edge. His hands were shaking. "If her legs give out." "I know," I choked out. The cub's breathing was barely visible now, its small chest rising and falling in shallow, irregular gasps. Blood was seeping into the mud beneath its shoulder, dark and thick. Its eyes, those beautiful amber eyes, were starting to glaze over with the blank stare that comes right before the end. It was a baby. Just a baby. And Winnie knew it. My dog, my broken, discarded, arthritic dog who'd spent 7 years learning that the world was cruel, was choosing this. She could have stayed back. Could have let nature take its course. Could have protected herself the way she'd been forced to for so long. But she didn't. She pressed harder against that tire, her paws digging into the mud for leverage, her entire body screaming in pain. I saw her back right leg start to slide, saw her catch herself, saw her plant her weight again even though I knew it was agony. "I'm sorry," I whispered to her, tears blurring my vision. "I'm so sorry, baby. Because I'd made my choice too. I wasn't going to pull her out. If she was brave enough to try, I had to be brave enough to let her." "On 3, Thomas said, wedging the bar deeper into the gap Winnie had created. Maria, grab the other end. 1. The cub let out a weak, plaintive cry that sounded heartbreakingly human. 2. Winnie's front leg buckled, then caught. She was running on pure will now, nothing else. The joint supplements I gave her every morning, the pain medication, the heated bed that soothed her aching muscles, none of it could help her here. This was beyond medicine. Beyond reason. 3. We heaved upward with everything we had. The tire shifted, lifted an inch, 2 inches. Thomas jammed the bar in further, using it as a fulcrum. The metal groaned. My shoulders burned. Maria was crying and pulling at the same time. "More!" Thomas shouted. "We need more." That's when the forest fell completely silent. Not gradually. Not like a fade. Like someone had thrown a switch and turned off every living sound in the jungle. The insects stopped. The distant bird calls ceased. Even the rain seemed to pause, drops suspended in air. And in that terrible, suffocating silence, I heard it. A sound that made my blood turn to ice. The soft padding of enormous paws on wet earth. Moving toward us. From the trees. Maria's face was drained of color. "No," she breathed. "No, no, no." Thomas's hands froze on the bar, his eyes locked on something behind me. "Don't turn around," he whispered. "Whatever you do, Agnes, do not turn around." But Winnie did. Still wedged beneath that tire, still holding impossible weight, my sheltered dog turned her head toward the tree line. And she didn't growl. Didn't bark. Didn't show fear. She just looked. And whatever was standing in those trees, whatever massive, wild thing had come in response to its baby's cry. It looked back. I know you're on the edge of your seat right now. And if this story is giving you chills, imagine having a new one like this in your feed every single week. Hit subscribe and turn on notifications, because stories like Winnie's deserve to be shared, and I promise you, what happens next will absolutely blow your mind. Now, back to that moment in the jungle. She emerged from the shadows like a living weapon. The tigress was massive, far larger than I'd imagined a Bengal tiger could be. Her shoulders were thick with muscle, her head broad and powerful, her body rippling with barely contained violence. Rain dripped from her whiskers. Her ears were pinned flat against her skull. And her eyes, those ancient, golden eyes, were fixed on us with an intensity that felt like being held at gunpoint. This was a mother who'd found strangers touching her dying child. I didn't breathe. Couldn't breathe. My body understood what my mind was still processing: we were prey. There was no negotiation here, no reasoning with 300 pounds of apex predator. One lunge and it would be over. For all of us. The tigress took another step forward, her massive paws silent despite her size. She was close enough now that I could see the scars on her muzzle, the way her muscles bunched in preparation. Close enough that I could smell her, wild, primal, dangerous. Maria was frozen beside me, the steel bar still in her trembling hands. Thomas had gone absolutely still, his breathing shallow and controlled. We all knew the same truth: running would trigger the chase. Fighting would be suicide. Our only option was to stay perfectly motionless and pray she didn't perceive us as a threat. But I wasn't perfectly motionless. Because I was kneeling between that tigress and Winnie. My dog, still wedged beneath the tire, still holding up crushing weight, was completely vulnerable. If the mother attacked, Winnie couldn't run. Couldn't defend herself. She was trapped in a position of absolute sacrifice, and I was the only thing standing between her and those killing jaws. "Don't move," Thomas breathed behind me. "Agnes, don't you dare move." But I had to. Slowly, keeping my movements small and deliberate, I shifted my weight so my body blocked the tigress's direct line to Winnie. It was instinct. Stupid, suicidal instinct. But I couldn't watch my dog die without at least trying to shield her. The tigress's eyes tracked my movement. Her lips pulled back slightly, revealing teeth that could crush bone. A low rumble built in her chest, not quite a growl yet, but a warning that vibrated through the ground beneath my knees. This was it. This was the moment she would charge. But then Winnie made a sound. Not a bark. Not a whimper. Just a soft, exhausted exhale, the kind of breath that comes when you've given everything and have nothing left. Her legs were shaking so violently now I could hear her joints clicking. The pain had to be unbearable. But she didn't move from beneath that tire. She stayed. Stayed protecting a creature that wasn't hers. Stayed even though a predator twice her size was seconds away from ending her. Stayed because somewhere in her scarred, abandoned, beautiful heart, she'd decided that this baby's life mattered more than her own safety. The tigress's ears flickered forward. Just slightly. Just enough that I noticed. She was listening. Watching. I didn't know. But something had shifted in her posture. The coiled violence was still there, but now there was something else. Something I couldn't name but could feel like electricity in the air. Her eyes moved from me to Winnie. And stayed there. For a long, impossible moment, predator and prey looked at each other across a distance measured in heartbeats. The tigress's nostrils flared, scenting. Her massive head tilted fractionally, as if trying to understand what she was seeing. A dog. Small. Broken. Trembling with pain. Holding up a tire to save her cub. "Please," I whispered, not even sure what I was asking for. "Please understand. We're trying to help." The tigress didn't attack. She didn't retreat either. She just waited. Watching. Assessing. Her intelligent eyes moved between her dying baby and the strange, small creature who'd wedged herself beneath crushing weight to give that baby one more breath. "Thomas," I said quietly, my voice barely audible. "The bar. Now." He moved like he was defusing a bomb, slow, controlled, silent. The steel bar slid deeper into the gap. Maria's hands joined his. Together, they heaved. The tire lifted. The cub gasped, a real breath this time, deeper, and rolled free from the crushing weight. Winnie collapsed backward into my arms, her whole body convulsing with exhaustion and pain. I held her against my chest, feeling her rapid heartbeat, her shallow panting. The tigress moved so fast I didn't see it happen. One moment she was 10 feet away. The next, she was standing over her cub, her enormous body creating a shield between us and her baby. She lowered her head and touched her nose to the cub's face. The small tiger let out a weak chuff, broken, but alive. The mother's eyes found mine. And something passed between us that I'll never be able to explain. Not forgiveness. Not gratitude. But recognition. Acknowledgement. An understanding that transcended species, transcended language, transcended everything except the primal truth that we were both creatures who protected what we loved. She picked up her cub gently by the scruff of its neck. And then, impossibly, before she turned toward the jungle, she looked at Winnie one more time. The tigress carried her cub into the jungle, and for 3 heartbeats, I thought it was over. Then she stopped. Just at the edge of the tree line, still visible through the hanging vines. She set the cub down carefully and turned back, her golden eyes finding us one last time. Not threatening. Not grateful. Just, watching. Memorizing. As if she was marking our faces in some deep, wild part of her memory. Then she was gone. Did that just happen? Maria whispered, still frozen in place. I couldn't answer. My arms were full of Winnie, and she was trembling so violently I thought she might be going into shock. Her back legs had given out completely. When I tried to shift her weight, she let out a sharp yelp of pain that broke my heart. We need to get her to Dr. Morrison, I said, my voice cracking. Now. The X-rays confirmed what I'd feared. Winnie had torn ligaments in both back legs, severely inflamed her arthritis, and possibly fractured a small bone in her front paw. Dr. Morrison's face was grave as she showed me the images. She's done significant damage, Agnes. The stress she put on these joints. She shook her head. We'll need to increase her pain medication significantly. Anti-inflammatories twice daily. Complete rest for at least 2 weeks. And she'll need that orthopedic bed more than ever, no hard surfaces, nothing that will stress these joints further. I stroked Winnie's head as she lay sedated on the examination table. Whatever she needs. Dr. Morrison wrote prescriptions for stronger pain medication, prescription-grade joint supplements, and muscle relaxants to help with the spasms. Keep her comfortable. Keep her still. And Agnes? She met my eyes. What she did today, that kind of exertion could have killed her. Her body isn't built for that anymore. I know, I whispered. But Winnie had done it anyway. At home, I set up her orthopedic bed in the warmest corner of the porch, added extra heated blankets, and surrounded her with her favorite soft toys. I gave her the pain medication with a spoonful of peanut butter, the way she liked it. She could barely lift her head, but her tail managed one weak thump when I sat beside her. You're the bravest thing I've ever known, I told her, tears streaming down my face. That first night, I slept on the floor beside her bed, one hand resting on her side so she'd know she wasn't alone. And that's when I started noticing the signs. The jungle around the sanctuary had changed. At dawn, I'd find massive paw prints in the mud near the fence line, too large to be anything but a tiger. Fresh scratches on tree trunks at the border of the property. And sometimes, in the hour just before sunrise, I'd catch a flash of orange and black moving through the undergrowth. She was still here. The mother tiger hadn't left. She's watching us, Thomas said 3 days later, pointing to a fresh set of tracks near the perimeter. She's been circling the sanctuary every night. Staying just outside the fence. Why? Maria asked. Her cub is safe. She should have moved on. But I understood. She was evaluating us. Making sure we were who she thought we were. Testing whether the moment of trust beneath that tire had been real or a fluke. Every night, she came closer. Every morning, I'd find her tracks nearer to the porch where Winnie slept. Winnie felt it too. Despite her pain, despite the medication that should have kept her drowsy, she'd lift her head every evening around dusk and stare toward the tree line. Her tail would wag, just slightly, just enough. Like she was saying hello to someone only she could sense. They're connected now, Dr. Morrison said during a follow-up visit, watching Winnie's reaction to some distant sound in the jungle. Animals don't forget acts of sacrifice. That tigress knows what your dog did. And somehow, Winnie knows she's being watched. On the 7th night, I woke to find Winnie standing at the edge of the porch, despite strict orders for bed rest. She was staring into the darkness, her body relaxed, her tail wagging slowly. I looked where she was looking. And there, just barely visible in the moonlight, were two golden eyes staring back. The tigress. She didn't move. Didn't growl. Just watched my broken shelter dog with something that looked almost like reverence. Then she turned and disappeared into the night. She's decided, I whispered to Winnie, helping her back to her orthopedic bed. You're hers now, too. I had no idea how right I was. Or how soon that bond would be tested. 6 weeks after the rescue, the veterinary team cleared the tiger cub for release. I stood at the edge of the sanctuary with Winnie, still limping but stronger now, her medication stabilized, her orthopedic bed having worked miracles during her recovery. Thomas and Maria were preparing the transport crate, but my focus was on the forest beyond the fence. She was out there. I knew it. The mother tigress had never truly left. Even after the nightly visits stopped, I'd find evidence of her presence, scratch marks on trees, the occasional distant roar that made Winnie's ears perk up. She'd been waiting. Watching over us while her cub healed in our care. Are you sure you want to be here for this? Thomas asked, approaching with the crate. Inside, the young tiger, no longer dying, now healthy and strong, paced restlessly. He'd grown in 6 weeks. His stripes were vivid, his eyes bright and alert. The mother might come close. It could be dangerous. I need to be here, I said simply. Winnie pressed against my leg, her warmth grounding me. The release site was the same clearing where we'd found him, symbolic, the rangers said. A way to help the mother locate her cub. We opened the crate, and the young tiger burst out with energy we'd only dreamed of 6 weeks ago. He bounded into the grass, testing his legs, and then stopped. He turned back toward us. Specifically, toward Winnie. For a moment, they looked at each other, the tiger cub who'd been saved, and the sheltered dog who'd nearly broken herself to do it. The cub took one tentative step forward, then another, until he was close enough that Winnie could have touched him with her nose. She didn't move. Just wait. The cub let out a soft chuff, a sound I'd learned meant recognition, affection, and touched his nose briefly to Winnie's. Then he turned and ran toward the tree line. That's when she appeared. The tigress materialized from the jungle like smoke taking form. She was even more magnificent than I remembered, powerful, regal, terrifying. Her cub ran to her, and she greeted him with the tender ferocity only a mother could manage, nuzzling him, checking him over, her massive body curving protectively around him. But she wasn't done. She lifted her head and looked directly at us. At me. At Winnie. The world held its breath. Then, slowly, so slowly it felt ceremonial, the tigress lowered her head. Not in submission. In acknowledgement. The kind of gesture that transcends species, that speaks to something ancient and universal, a debt recognized. A life owed. A bond sealed. She's bowing, Maria breathed beside me. Oh my God, she's actually bowing. Winnie's tail wagged once. Twice. And then the tigress did something that made my throat close with emotion. She turned her cub toward us one last time, as if showing him. Remember them, she seemed to say. Remember what they did. Remember who saved you. The cub looked at Winnie and chuffed again, louder this time, more certain. Then mother and child turned and walked into the jungle together. But just before they disappeared into the green shadows, the tigress paused. She looked back over her shoulder, her golden eyes finding mine one final time. It wasn't goodbye. It was a promise. I felt it in my bones as we drove back to the sanctuary. Winnie felt it too. She was restless that night, despite her pain medication, despite the comfort of her heated orthopedic bed. She kept standing at the edge of the porch, staring into the darkness like she was waiting for something. What is it, girl? I asked, stroking her ears. She whined softly, then settled back onto her bed, but her eyes remained fixed on the tree line. The forest remembers, I thought. And so do they. I didn't know then how soon we'd need them to remember. I didn't know that in 3 months, danger would come for us in a way I couldn't possibly prepare for. And I didn't know that when hope seemed lost, when human help couldn't reach us in time, the debt sealed in that moment would be repaid in full. The forest keeps its promises. Even when we've forgotten we're owed them. If Winnie's story is touching your heart, if you felt that lump in your throat, if you've been rooting for this brave little shelter dog, then you're part of something special. Click subscribe right now, because there are thousands of others just like you who believe broken things can become legends. And here's the thing, this story isn't over yet. The most powerful moment is still coming. Subscribe so you never miss these incredible true stories. Now let me tell you what happened 3 months later. 3 months later, everything went wrong in the space of 10 seconds. Winnie and I were checking the far perimeter fence, routine work, nothing dangerous, when we stumbled onto something we shouldn't have seen. Poachers. 3 of them, rifles slung across their backs, standing over a freshly killed deer with radio collars scattered at their feet. Our sanctuary animals. They'd been killing our rehabilitated wildlife. The moment they saw us, their expressions shifted from surprise to calculation. I was a witness. A liability. And we were miles from help, deep in the forest where no one would hear me scream. Turn around, the largest one said, his hand moving to his rifle. You didn't see anything. I grabbed Winnie's collar and started backing away, heart hammering. I'm leaving. I won't say anything. Too late for that. He raised the rifle. Winnie growled, a sound I'd never heard from her before, deep and protective. She stepped in front of me despite her arthritis, despite the fact that her body still ached on cold mornings even with her pain medication and joint supplements. My small, broken shelter dog was trying to protect me from armed men. Call off your dog, the poacher warned. Winnie, no. The rifle cracked. The shot went wide, a warning, but Winnie yelped and I screamed, pulling her behind me. There was nowhere to run. The other 2 poachers were circling, cutting off our escape routes. Radio equipment sat useless in my pocket, we were in a dead zone, no signal, no help coming. This was it. This was how it ended. The lead poacher aimed again, this time with deadly intent. "Sorry," he said. "Wrong place, wrong time." I closed my eyes and wrapped my arms around Winnie, feeling her rapid heartbeat against my chest, her warm breath on my neck. I thought about her orthopedic bed waiting empty on the porch. The medication bottles lined up on the counter. The soft dog toys she'd finally learned to play with. All the love we'd still had left to give each other. Then the forest exploded with sound. A roar, massive, primal, earth-shaking, split the air like thunder. The poachers spun, rifles swinging toward the source, and I opened my eyes just in time to see him. The tiger. But not the cub we'd saved. This was a young male now, nearly full-grown, easily 200 pounds of muscle and fury. His stripes were vivid against golden fur, his amber eyes blazing with recognition and rage. He charged. Not at us. At them. The poachers scattered, shouting, firing wild shots that missed as the tiger moved like liquid violence. He didn't kill, didn't need to. His presence alone was enough. One man dropped his rifle and ran. Another scrambled up a tree. The leader stood frozen, weapon trembling in his hands. The tiger positioned himself between us and the poachers, his massive body a living shield. He was protecting us. Actually protecting us. But he wasn't alone. From the opposite side of the clearing, she emerged. The mother tigress, larger, more terrifying, her eyes locked on the armed men with cold fury. She'd brought her son. They'd come together. For us. For Winnie. The lead poacher took one look at two tigers flanking us and made the only smart decision of his life. He dropped his rifle and ran, crashing through the undergrowth after his companions. Their panicked shouts faded into the distance until the forest fell silent again. The young tiger turned to face us. Winnie, still trembling in my arms, lifted her head. Her tail began to wag, slow, tentative, then stronger. The tiger chuffed, that same soft sound of recognition, and took one step closer. Then another. Until he was close enough that I could see the scar on his shoulder where the tire had crushed him. The place where Winnie had saved his life. He lowered his massive head and touched his nose to Winnie's. Just like he had 3 months ago. Except this time, he was the one strong enough to protect. Behind him, the mother tigress watched with those ancient golden eyes. And in them, I saw something that took my breath away. Satisfaction. Completion. The debt had been repaid. The circle was closed. Mother and son stood guard as I gathered Winnie into my arms and began the long walk back to the sanctuary, my legs shaking, tears streaming down my face. They followed at a distance, silent, watchful, ensuring we made it safely home. At the edge of the sanctuary fence, they stopped. The young tiger looked at Winnie one last time and roared, not aggressive, but declarative. Announcing to the forest, "These ones are protected. These ones are ours." Then they disappeared into the green shadows. Winnie wagged her tail until they were gone. That night, I couldn't sleep. Winnie was curled on her orthopedic bed beside the porch, finally resting after I'd given her an extra dose of her calming medication. The day's terror had left her exhausted, but somehow also peaceful. Like she'd known all along that help would come. That the forest would remember. I sat watching her in the moonlight, this small dog who'd been hours from death in a shelter kennel, who'd needed special beds and joint supplements and pain medication just to walk without whimpering. The dog the world had labeled too broken to be worth saving. She'd saved a tiger's life. And that tiger had saved hers. The mathematics of it were stunning. Impossible. Beautiful. A soft sound pulled me from my thoughts, the padding of paws on earth. I tensed, then relaxed as two shapes materialized at the edge of the fence. The young tiger and his mother, side by side, watching us from the darkness. They'd come back. Winnie lifted her head, her tail beginning its slow wag. She tried to stand, but her legs were too tired, too sore. Instead, she just watched them, her brown eyes bright with something I can only describe as joy. The mother tigress stepped closer to the fence than she'd ever come before. Close enough that I could see every detail of her face in the moonlight, the scars of survival, the wisdom in her eyes, the power in every line of her body. She looked at Winnie for a long moment. Then she did something that made my breath catch. She lay down. Right there, on the other side of the fence. The most powerful predator in the jungle, lowering herself to the ground in a posture of rest. Of peace. Her son settled beside her, his head resting on his massive paws, his eyes half closed but still watching Winnie. They were keeping vigil. Guarding us while we slept. I understood then what I was witnessing. This wasn't just gratitude. This wasn't a debt repaid and forgotten. This was something deeper, something that transcended species and survival instincts and everything we think we know about the natural world. This was family. The forest had claimed Winnie as its own. Not as prey. Not as an intruder. But as one of its protectors, its heroes, its legends. She would be remembered in this place long after both of us were gone. The small dog who held up a tire. The broken creature who chose courage over safety. The one who proved that love doesn't require claws or size or power. Just a willing heart. You're not forgotten anymore, I whispered to Winnie, tears sliding down my cheeks. You never will be again. She turned her head to look at me, and in her eyes, I saw understanding. She'd always known her worth. Even when the shelter had marked her for death. Even when her body hurt and the world seemed cruel. She'd carried that knowledge quietly, patiently, waiting for the moment when it would matter. And when that moment came, she hadn't hesitated. The tigers stayed until dawn, silent sentinels in the darkness. When the first light broke through the trees, they rose together, stretched, and looked at us one final time. The mother tigress chuffed softly, a sound of farewell, but not goodbye. Then they melted into the jungle. But I knew they'd be back. Maybe not tomorrow. Maybe not next week. But whenever the forest whispered that we needed them, they'd come. Because some bonds, forged in mud and rain and impossible choices, don't break. They become permanent. A week later, I was preparing Winnie's evening medication, her pain pills, her joint supplements, her anti-inflammatory, when I noticed something new near the fence. A small pile of freshly killed game. Clean. Untouched. Left deliberately. A gift from the forest. From that day forward, offerings appeared regularly. Food. Warnings when dangerous animals passed too close. Protection we never asked for but somehow always received. The sanctuary staff started calling Winnie the tiger's friend. Visitors would ask to see the famous dog who'd saved a wild animal's life. But I knew the truth was bigger than that. Winnie hadn't just saved one life. She'd proven something the world desperately needs to remember. That the broken can be heroes. That the discarded can be legends. That love, real, sacrificial, impossible love, creates bonds that echo through forests and lifetimes and species. Every night, Winnie still sleeps on her orthopedic bed beside my porch, surrounded by her soft toys and her medications and all the small comforts that ease her pain. But she doesn't sleep alone anymore. Because somewhere in the darkness beyond the fence, 2 tigers watch over her. Guarding the small dog who taught them that courage has nothing to do with size. And everything to do with heart. If Winnie's story moved you, if you felt something